There are two things that brought me to art therapy. That was some big difficulties in my life, major marriage difficulties, domestic abuse basically. And one night I phoned the Samaritans and I discovered what it was to be truly, truly listened to. It was something I hadn't experienced. So following that, I applied, I trained, and I became a Samaritan. And I was a Samaritan for 14 years. The stories that I came across and the realization that true listening can really bring healing. Being heard is something that everybody wants and many of us don't get. We all know what it's like to talk to somebody, be giving something really important and suddenly become aware that actually their eyes have shifted to over your shoulder and they're not actually listening. So anyway, those 14 years were of immense importance. Before that, I had many years as an art student. In fact, I wanted to be an art student for the whole of my life. It's such a wonderful process. And during that time, I had one tutor who recognized something in me. And David, he took me on a trip down to the first hospital that used art therapy. So that was my first introduction when I was age about 20. And that vanished. I put that aside, and just as well, because you really need a lot of life experience to be an art therapist. You have to have your own creative process rolling on alongside you all of the time and developing, but your life experiences inform, how you're going to be an art therapist. And that's mostly the difficult experiences. I went to Reading University, got a fine art degree, and did some part-time work with children with disabilities. And there I worked with art with them and realised that art helps in so many spheres of life. And at some point I decided, I think I remembered the teacher, the tutor, who had suggested art therapy. And so with the Samaritan training and the 14 years of skill, plus my own continuing process, I applied and was accepted straight away. That was a really, really big training with lots and lots of personal therapy. Because if you are sitting with a person doing art therapy and they come up with something that triggers something within you that you haven't dealt with, you're going to be absolutely no good. So within the therapy, you've really got to... my therapy was Jungian, which I love, because it also touches on spirit. It's not just looking at the wounds, it's looking at spirit and soul. So you have to dredge up all those areas in your life that are difficult and look at them and shine the light on them and try in some way to integrate, not get rid of them. I don't believe in getting rid of stuff, but you integrate them within yourself so that you grow from it. So I became a freelance art therapist. I started off working voluntarily in a hospice and found myself working with people who were dying from cancer particularly, but also that was my first introduction to HIV and AIDS. I also went and worked in a clinic which was specifically for AIDS and HIV adults. And some of the work they did was absolutely amazing. They expressed themselves in a way that was heartrending and beautiful. At that point, AIDS was a death sentence. And I can remember this man who used to do collages. And they were just out of this world. It was so intricate. He would use a scalpel knife. And at first I was a bit worried about him using a scalpel knife because I knew he was not too keen on living. But he cut things so beautifully and perfectly, and he did it mostly in silence. He found it very difficult to talk about what was happening to him. But all of the process was coming out through this incredible work. I wish I had one to keep. But of course he took them all away. And the silent work was his process. And he came back every week and either continued or did more. And, you know, my heart kind of cries just thinking about him. I worked with children. I worked with very, very young children for a while who didn't take very much to the art. So I learned to adapt and I became a drama therapist. And I would become whatever the child wanted me to be, whoever he wanted me to be. And this was often playing out abusive situations. I learned so much, changing my voice, acting, real learning curve for me, unbelievable learning curve. One of the most interesting was working at Reading Jail, which was called Reading Prison then, and it was with, I think they were called young offenders, aged 17 to 21. They sat round a big table and I used to get a good cohort of attenders. And one day I said, "What's that funny smell?" And there was silence. And then there were these little quiet sniggers. I said, "What is it?" I said, "You don't know, do you, Mum? Do you?" I can't remember what they called me. "Miss, you don't know, do you, Miss?" And I said, "No." And one of them brought a weed up from under the table. He said, "We've been smoking this week after week and you haven't noticed, Miss." So I said, "Oh, well, what I don't know about, I'm not going to worry about." I was pretty popular after that. But the thing that touched me most, amongst some of the pictures that I took in, because I had been making a living also as an illustrator, was a very perfect picture of a rose, a painting of a rose. And all of the boys loved this picture. And after that, it would be, Miss, will you show me how to draw a rose, please? Miss, could you do the outline and I'll fill it in? I want to give it to my mum when she comes visiting. Miss, will you do it for me, please? My girlfriend's coming. I want to give it to my girlfriend. Lovely memories. Lovely memories.